Thank you, Manuel, for coming, and we look forward to a very interesting conversation.
I'm Chris Sabatini. I'm the Executive Director at Global Americans and a professor at Columbia. What we're going to do is have a conversation here. This won't be a rote presentation, and then allow all of you to join in the conversation as well. But I want to ask Manuel a few questions, and then we'll jump in. When we start, Manuel, explain a little bit. You were active around the constitutional referendum and reform recently that produced some surprising results. Can you explain a little bit what your position was during that process and how the result came as a shock for those who weren't following Cuba?
Okay, thank you. As I talked to it, when I finish, you don't ask. Well, first, I was one of the main dissidents that encouraged Cuban people to engage, to participate in the debate about constitutional reform in Cuba. Because one of my ideas is that only participation gives the people the possibility and the right to change the political scenario in every country. Not to be a way of the political process, but to engage in the political process. So I, with other people, prepare what we call constitutional roundtable for giving some space, some room to the citizens and communities to to propose the ideas they want to be in the constitution in Cuba. It's open the possibility of establishing a discussion, conversation with other different people at the community levels. Communists, people that don't have any ideological background, or people that only want to know, that were curious about about how the Constitution was going to reflect the ideas and the new setup, the new mentality of the diversity of young, elder, religious, cultural, LGBT communities, and so on. It was a good and a great experience to have this in some areas and some provinces in Cuba. But the problem was that the project came from the dissident movement. So we have to confront not only the policy of the government, we have to confront the political police that try all the time to prevent us from participating in this process from our own ideas of how to establish democracy through this constitutional debate in Cuba. At some point, the government interrupted this participation of citizens discussing ideas not coming from the Communist Party, but ideas coming from their communities of their groups. So we concentrate in trying to participate at the same time in the referendum, but pointed out some articles in the Constitution that don't reflect the momentum of the Cuban society. That were 3 articles mainly in the Constitution. Article number 1, article number 4, article number 5, that give the Communist Party all the possibility to hold on the power and to control the society. Not allowing people from different ideological backgrounds to participate in the political process. So that was the approach that we had at the moment telling citizens, say no to these articles and say yes to the rest of the Constitution. Because the process was a kind of hybrid constitution where the government recognized new rights for people. They talk about human rights in the Constitution for the first time. But at the same time, try to control of the political power in the country. And why we did that? We act like this because we think that after the Constitution, we have the possibility to change the Constitution. Using the right this Constitution recognized to participate and to change at the level of law, at the same time at the level of article of the Constitution to allow people to engage or to participate. So we hope in the near future to have the possibility of collecting signatures or opening more room, more space for people to participate day to day in this important debate in terms of constitutional reform in Cuba.
Thank you. Explain a little bit what it's like to be a dissident human rights activist in Cuba. You've been arrested multiple times. You've been harassed. You mentioned that your meetings and the kind of what is the day-to-day like for you? But also, how has that changed in terms of now with access to the internet, with a lot of the changes that Obama implemented, it opened up greater space. Explain.
Well, it's very hard to be dissident, and I don't recommend you.
Not a career choice. My former students don't try.
Okay, well, it's very hard. In day-to-day life, it's very important to keep in mind three things. First, you go out from your house, your home, your place, and maybe you confront the police waiting for you, say, where you go? Oh, I go to a meeting. No, it's not going to happen this way. So, it is very hard in this way. It is very hard also in economic terms. They are always accusing us of being mercenaries. We're part of the U.S. policies toward Cuba. It's not true. It's not true in my case, but it's generally it's not true. But it is hard because it affects the possibility of having a way of life. In my case, I try to write some digital newspaper and so on in order to. Some friends help me, but it's at the same time very complicated situation for us, and also our family. Because in the past, maybe our family was kept aside of the harassment of the government. But now they try to manage us through our family. But something has changed at this moment. First, we are more open to society, and the society is more open to us. They are eager to listen what we are saying, what we are proposing, what our alternatives are. And at the same time, the society has changed in an important way toward diversity and pluralism. Open for us to interact and to support our alternatives. And this grant a very good situation because we are not so isolated today in Cuba. 10 years ago, it was very hard. From the part of the government, the behavior has changed. They use right now what we call express detention. 5 minutes, they tell you for 5 minutes to the police station, stay here, sit down, don't move. Try to prevent us to participating in reunion. Once the time passed, well, they release you, you can go on to your house. This, they apply this in order to avoid the surveillance of the international community. You know, they are always accused of violating the human rights in Cuba, so they try to look for another way of getting their purpose and at the same time avoiding the surveillance of the international community. And Castro's times, nowadays it's Castro's time also that. In Castro's times, they felt comfortable with the society, so they allowed us to do much more things because we were not danger for them. To confront Castro was a very hard task, not only in Cuba, outside Cuba. But now the present president, designated one, was not elected, is afraid of a society that is gaining more protagonism inside Cuba. You know, there was a march, an 11 March.
May, the LGBT march against homophobia.
March. And that shows that civil society can be very, very powerful, fighting for their rights. They know that. And there were another march before, coming from peasants, farmers, taxi drivers, and people that are upset, very upset with the Cuban policies of our society. And this takes the Cuban government to harass much more the activity of the opposition of dissident Cuba. The last practice is to avoid that Cuban people attend any invitation coming from the United States or Spain or Colombia. You get to the airport, I'm going to say you are regulated, you can go out. You ask why, they say, well, we don't know. You have the order not to allow you to go abroad, so you have to stay here in your own country, enjoy leisure, get back. And this is the last practice, coming from 2017 till today. There's a lot of, much more than 300 people that have suffered this new practice coming from the government. After they released, in 2013, they released all Cubans to go abroad, enter, and go way out. And now they are trying to impede this to happen. And that's more or less the situation right now.
Question for the status for Afro-Cubans. We talked about this earlier. Obviously, the revolution has did a lot for opening up educational opportunities and other things for Afro-Cubans, but there have been growing concerns, and I'm looking at my friend Katrina, who's also worked on this. There have been growing concerns about growing inequality among Afro-Cubans and the rest of the population, growing signs of racism, particularly in the tourism industry. Give us a sense of that social interaction among Afro-Cubans and the challenges that are faced now.
Yeah, a lot of challenges. All of these challenges are structural ones. First, you know, since 1959 till 1991, there was a sense that we live in a melting pot in Cuba. Black, white, mulatto, everybody live in an equality situation, enjoying the sunrise, between your mark, of course. But after 1991, the split between white and black people began to grow. And it was stimulated by the Cuban government policies. The first thing the Cuban government did to survive was to open to the community, to the exiled community of Cuban in Miami, to send money to their relative inside Cuba, but mostly white people. Sorry, mostly Cuban Thai community are composed by white people, you know. And this is a structure because I don't have family. Yeah. The Bible. Because I don't have family in Miami. And what was the solution? Well, what was that kind of solution of the economic problem of a country? When with these policies you are going to affect a lot of people, the majority of people. Second, they open the economy to tourism in Cuba. Tourism in Cuba. Thank you. And there, the possibility of Cuba to work was very, very narrow for black people. First, because of the demand of the investor. The investor said, I want well-prepared people, mainly white people if possible, because we don't understand anything about the religious, practical religions of Afro-Cubans. So we prefer white people to avoid not to have problem attending the assistance of visitor. Second, because this industry, this sector in Cuba depends much more from people who are connected with the establishment. And black people have no connection inside Cuba. This is the second reason of the structural inequality established after the 90s in Cuba. That reflects in the political level. If you see, if you look there, who are the guys to decide what is going to happen? You can be sure no one of them are black people. If you take a picture from the Central Committee of the Communist Party, you will see there a lot of white people and few black people representing the interest. And this why the gap between black and white people in Cuba that needs to be faced with another mindset, with another kind of policy in order to build an inclusive society from the time in.
I want to ask one last question, and then I'll open it up because I do want this to be a conversation. What do you see as the future? There's been a transition, and as you say, to an appointed president who is elected within a very closed setting. You have a new constitution. There's now news of food shortages as a result of the decline of Venezuelan oil to Cuba. What do you see in the short and medium term of future change?
Well, I see an evolution, a transition. We are living in a transition moment right now in Cuba. You know, with this all diversity appearing in the scenario, and at the same time with some change in the mentality of some part of the elite that realize that right now we need to modernize the country, open the country, no closing anymore. It is, of course, we should count on a biological factor. 3-4 people are in Cuba who control real, especially that they are more than 83 years old. So all this create a possibility to continuously approach into a transition process in order to democratize the Cuban society. Now, after the referendum and the discussion about the constitutional reform, I mean, Cuban people has gained more constitutional culture, and it's very important. And they are eager to participate in the different initiatives we have in the Cuban society in order to transform and to democratize from the law towards the rule of law. That is the most important thing. And we are in a situation where the society demands all the time, demands changes to the Cuban government, and a Cuban government that all the time I try to close this open range of demand coming from the Cuban society. And this creates a tension that I think in the short or medium term will be solved in the direction of all the things that Cuban people want to have in our country. To learn nice, to be part of the democracies around the world, no matter what are the problems with democracy, but we are fighting for, and people are eager to continue to participate in this one.
I wanted to ask about your conversation with President Obama. We'll leave that in your ideas about policy changes from Obama to Trump, but we'll leave that for questions. Please identify yourself. I don't think we need a microphone, so just stand up, identify yourself, and yell it out. Yes.
Hi, my name is Maricel Palacios. I was born in Cuba, but I left in 1999, so a while ago. We met in DC a long time ago too. But I wanted to know about young people in Cuba that are perhaps more engaged in the political process, in activism, that may or may not be dissidents. I know that a few years ago there was an election and there were two people that actually from the neighborhood, they gathered so much support that the neighbors started defending him, or it was two guys, defending them against the authorities that were harassing these people. So I'm just more curious about young people and activism.
That's a good question, because we have a problem with this. First, a lot of young people want to emigrate. There's a lot of in Tapachula, I think, in Mexico, the border. In Juarez, there's a lot of young people.
We're seeing a lot of them are leaving. They're leaving.
They are living there.
Yeah.
Try to satisfy their needs outside Cuba. But there is a more engaged community of young people trying to do a lot of things. There is a new generation of civil society in Cuba that it's formed by young people. In the LGBTY community, artists community, a lot of people, and at the same time in the more traditional ways of building civil society. We have, for instance, a net of young leaders in different communities that are engaging most of the time in community labor in order to engage neighborhood, no matter the age, but mainly with a measure toward young people. And we see at the same time young people, in Cuba, this group is called the Young Taliban Group, that defend in different ways what they see the idea of revolution, the idea of Che Guevara. We have all kind of commitment coming from young people in Cuba, but really we have a lot of them working for democracy, participating in this. You mentioned both people that present themselves as to be elected at the municipality level in Cuba. One of them was young people. And unfortunately, he decided to live in Miami after the repression of the Cuban government. The older people remain in Cuba and is wanting to present themselves in another election when it comes. But, you know, here we have the problem of what is the real alternative for young people living in Cuba, and what is the real possibility for these young people to participate, and at the same time, the need of to have much more engagement coming from young people in Cuba. We live in this scenario, but we have a lot of young people working, for instance, with me, and the group I represent.
The questions? Yes, Dan.
I'm Dan Nuku. I'm a lawyer. Spent a lot of time on Cuba. The Trump administration seems to be openly hostile to Cuba, to Nicaragua, to Venezuela.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
What is going to be the effect of that, at least through this term, and perhaps if we re-elected another 4 years, on the people of Cuba?
It's not a good news.
I got that part. I was hoping you could elaborate.
Yeah. The effect of the impact of Trump being re-elected, I think it's going to be, isn't going to be good for democracy. Trump has given to the Cuban government a weapon they want to have: the confrontation between the United States and Cuba. So this kind of tension and confrontation paralyzes civil society, paralyzes political movement, all the human rights movement paralyzed in front of this. And you know, we live in a country where the political police has a big arm, and the civil society has weak arm. You know, we have to face this, and in moment of tension, as in the past, well, the government and the hardliners in the government feel very good. So I think it depends. In the case of Cuba, U.S. voters, but I think that if Trump is re-elected, we are going to have a lot of problems to continue this fighting for democracy in Cuba. The Obama policies gave us two important opportunities. One was to face to the government and say, you are the responsible of our problems and our charges. Something Cuba has a concept of that. Second opportunity, second possibility is to count on young people to engage them in political fighting for reforms, because young people are the weak part of the Cuban society. No matter their energy, they are the weak part. And that's why I think it is important not to count on the United States in order to have democracy in Cuba. It's not what I'm saying, but to have a better relation between the two countries in order to facilitate the fight for democracy in Cuba in a way that be successful for our fight.
Let me just ask a follow-up question. We've already seen a partial rolling back of the Obama changes. Normalization remains, but of course the embassy is a skeleton staff right now, yeah. What has been have you felt already the effects in terms of the reduced connections, in terms of travel? I mean, how is it being felt already by the Cuban people in
Yeah.
It's hard.
You know, Cuban people feel great with Obama before Obama say, well, we stop this policy of, I don't know.
He said it was the end of the Cold War, putting an end to the Cold
No,
War.
no, with the end of Cold War, but the policy of dry.
Wet foot, dry foot, yes.
People start to hate Obama because the possibility of going out from Cuba was to them at that moment. But then they thought that, I'm talking about the level of Cuban people, of course, they thought that with Trump, this policy would be reestablished again in order to have. But what happened with Trump? They see that Trump closed all the opportunities, all the possibilities, and not only affected dissident community, or civic community, affect families, contact. Now there's around 20,000 families trying to reconnect. The families from Cuba trying to reconnect with families in the exile, and they don't have the possibility to do that. They have to fly to go to Mexico to see if they can solve the migrant problems, and at the same time they have to take a bill of all the possibility of going to Brazil or to approach the U.S. embassy in that country in order to see if they can solve the problem, the migrant problem. So the connection between our two people are in the lowest level right now that it was in the past, and it doesn't help any longer the possibility of improving our relation and to have the cultural impact of the communication, the conversation with the rest of the world.
Okay. Then, yes.
One follow-up, I apologize.
No.
Let me put a sharper edge on my question. Will the Trump policies move the moderate, the middle class, the undecided core of the Cuban people towards the hardliners or towards the reformers?
No. It remains at the center, in the middle. And it remains. Why is the reason why? Because this middle class experience the possibility of building their own welfare, their own prosperity. They experience that. And they know that it's the Cuban government that prevent them from continuously growing their own welfare. So they are now not in supporting, of course, the hardliner in Cuba, but at the same time, they are not supporting the people they know that has not the power enough to change, to make the change needed in the Cuban society. They are watching and expecting situation to see what happened with the next election in the case of the United States, and what happened with the next generation of power in Cuba.
Let me do this, because we heard a lot during the Obama years of the growth of the entrepreneurial class, the private sector, those cuentapropistas. How are they being affected? I mean, you mentioned the middle class. I mean, that was for many reasons one of the major leverage points for the Obama policy to argue. We're going to help promote this entrepreneurial class. How have they been affected? I mean, both in terms of reduction of tourism, reduction of remittances, or the cap on remittances. Have they felt any effect?
Yes, of course. You know, in Cuba, the Airbnb industry, Airbnb industry is wide in Cuba, all over the country, and there is a fact by this change of policy. At the same time, it's a fact because the Cuban government realized that the people coming from abroad used to go to Airbnb more than hotels in order to rent, in order to eat. You know, Airbnb offer also restaurants in the backyard of their house, and they prefer that kind of relation in Cuba. Now affected by both sides, affected by Trump. Much of the money entering Cuba in the last 2 years were directed to the middle class, to the private sector, and in order to build, to rebuild houses or so on. And it is affected right now by this change of policy coming from Trump. You know? But at the same time, the Cuban government is afraid of the development of this middle class. They say in the narrative clearly, they say we don't want a middle class in Cuba because it has a direct impact in the political system. You know, we live in an island. It's not an island, but we know it's an island. We live there, and we are around 11 million people. We live in Western Hemisphere. We have another culture, and the more the Cuban government opens society, the more is the demand of participating in political culture, and the Cuban government doesn't want this to happen.
So ironically, the hardliners, the Trump administration's policy is enabling some of the hardliners in the other questions? Yes.
Hello, my name is Lemis, and I would like to hear a little bit more about the changes of the Constitution that you mentioned proposed in there, particularly as it relates to what social democracy means for you in Cuba. So what is your vision, and what does this mean for a Cuban listener to that?
The reform, as it is in the Constitution, are very important for Cuban people to participate in some rights. For instance, we have 2 or 3 articles that allow people to make reunion, to assembly, to collect signatures, and at the same time to propose some legislation in order to change, to improve. This is established in the Constitution right now. For instance, the Article 6 is the same as the Article 13 in the Human Declaration, the Declaration of Human Rights. It's the same. No. This opens the opportunity and the possibility to participate. The problem is if the government is going to respect this use of the rights. And the other side, for the part, it is important the recognition that the Constitution does of social and economic and cultural rights. And in this case, the present Constitution follows the lead of the 1940 Constitution in Cuba, before the Constitution, before the 1976 Constitution, that established and recognized something like we call like social democratic culture in Cuba. Social democratic in Cuba is a culture. It's embedded in all the society, all across the society, and it's important for the future. What is going now is a reaction of a teenage group in Miami and also in Cuba that defend a kind of conservative line of politics and a hard line, what we know, an alt-right in Cuba, more or less. And I try to say the way of having democracy in Cuba is moving Cuban society toward the right. because only the right is committed with democracy, with rule of law, with the defense of the constitution, and so on. But it doesn't fit up, it doesn't reflect what the Cuban society thinks about this. For me, as a social democrat, it's very important. I run the party, this kind of Cuba, Tea Party, of course. But what we try to do all the time is to say that social gains have the narrow relation with democratic values. We can't see them separately. We have to join, to put them together, and to understand that it is possible to participate in the liberal way of understanding the politics, free elections, recognition of free expression, liberties, and so on, and at the same time to fight for and to maintain, to gain social agenda that is compatible with the Cuban people culture.
Luis, I want to make sure I understood this correctly, because I think it's a critical point, if I'm understanding correctly, to your profile, which is that Cuban society tends to be more social democratic, looks more like Sweden than it does, say, Miami, or in terms of its attitudes. And what you're saying, if I'm understanding, is in the past, or traditionally, a lot of people have seen the pathway to democracy in Cuba as being one in which the recreation of an open market, conservative, libertarian country. But in fact, you have a different profile. You see more of a social democratic path. That's more, you believe is more in line.
In the past, the right party was a newspaper. There were not right party coming from right tendencies in Cuba. It was a newspaper, Diario de la Marina, that represents the interest of the right in Cuba. This is a tradition. All the art of parties in Cuba runs from revolutionarios to social democratic. In 1958 was created the first Democracia party in Cuba. So this this tradition is very important to maintain and to recognize when you talk about the reform democracy, the establishment of democracy in Cuba.
Trina, you're there.
Yes, hi, thank you so much. My name is Kathleen Hansing. I'm a professor
A little more loudly.
I'm a professor at CUNY, and thank you so much for your work. I really respect it a lot. I have two questions. One is, could you talk a little bit about the growing influence of the evangelical churches, especially on the recent constitutional reforms and gay marriage? And also maybe, as a lot of people think, their influence on the government to ban the conga contra la homofobia. That's one question. The other question is I wanted you to talk a little bit about the relationship between the different dissident and human rights groups. For a long time, there's been a lot of splits and maybe lack of communication. And so I'd like to, in this particular political moment, what is the communication and the relationship between the different?
First question. The evangelical are growing in Cuba in a way that is growing in Brazil, I think.
Guatemala.
Whole around the world. The case more familiar. The case more familiar for me. To me, is the one of Brazil.
Yeah.
I have read about it. And they are traditional, conservative. They are gaining a lot of influence in young people, as I said before. And they are an army, a group, eager to go free, to protest against this, what they call relaxing society. And maybe afraid of this group, some moderate in the government say, well, it's not the time for the recognition of marriage, the same sex. The famous 68 article. Some moderates try to stop this movement, and it helps the hardliner in the government. So there is a connection, it's very interesting, because there is a connection between the hardliner Communist Party in power in Cuba and this religious movement. And it's something strange in the case of Cuban society, but in the case of the modernization in some way of the Cuban society, open to different ideas. And at one point, both agree to try to control the movement of LGBT community. One menace with go to street if the government allow this the conga of this year, some evangelical churches, men of the government, we are going to street in a pro-family manifestation if you allow this to happen. And at the same time, some of the government say, well, we have to stop to avoid this to happen. That explains the answer of the response the Cuban government did to those who maintain the idea of going to street. It was very important, but at the same time it restructured the relation between the civil society and in the civil society, and that leads to the second question, because the division, the splits in the dissident movement is related to the vision different part of this movement has about how to democratize the Cuban society. Some depends on the relation they have with the Cuban exile community. That they say we have to overthrow the Cuban government in order to have democracy. And it has had an impact on the definition of part of the Cuban dissident movement. The other part is the one that tried to gradually transform the situation, connecting people to the different alternative. And right now that is possible because the new generation of civil society connected with LGBT community and other groups, artists, are the one who wants at the same time a gradual transformation using the institution framework of the Cuban society. And the new constitution gives this possibility to reunite and redefine at the same time the dissident movement and the civil society in this moment. But the fight continues. Fight goes on in this moment between these two views of how to democratize the Cuban society. Those who think we have nothing to do, we have nothing to say, we don't have nothing to have with Castro and all what is related to the Cuban government, and sectors saying, well, we don't have to do with Castro neither, but we have to use the institution in order to democratize the Cuban society. And this splits will go on in the near future, because at the same time that this group lost ground in Cuba, they try to foster at least his verbal contradiction and his verbal approach to the government and the rest of the what they call weak in the opposition, like me.
They're blaming you because you want to change within the system and you don't want to, the weak opposition. Ted, introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Ted Hemken. I also teach at CUNY.
You can tell it's summer vacation at CUNY.
Yes, we can actually have some fun and be with Manuel. Manuel, I reiterate what Catherine said, that I really admire your work and follow you closely. One of the questions I had that kind of follows up on Catherine's question has to do with the dissident community's success or failure at addressing issues that are of vital day-to-day concerns of Cuban people. The government has been successful for many years at making disidencia or disidente a very bad word. I know many Cubans who don't call themselves dissidents, but tend to have all of the same criticisms of the system that you have, but they don't want to go there and have the burden become a non-person, lose their job, but they have many of the same concerns, both in terms of fundamental change and day-to-day concerns that you have, that you've expressed, and that other dissidents express. So what, if anything, is the dissident community doing to communicate and to, let's say, strategize to build a greater following for everyday Cubans beyond just, human rights and democracy that are often abstract in people's minds and in their day-to-day life?
Well, we are trying to do a lot of things. One of them is to open ground conversation in community levels, for inviting people to this conversation and allow them to express what they think is better to do in order to improve their life. There are open room for that. With the methodology, we say, well, here we are going to have a conversation about what affects the community right now: water, food, schools, and so on. So they see us people committed with their daily life problems. And this is one thing, one experience we had, and we opened to talk about constitutional reform first. It was this experience. We continue on that. And we are succeeded in this. This is not a thing that is reflect every day in the newspaper, but it happened in the real life of our community. Also, we try to communicate, to establish contact with this kind of people, saying, I think like you, but I don't want to be seen like you. Mm-hmm. And it was very interesting to see what happened after the march of the LGBTQI community, because most of them call us after to say, well, where were you? I don't see you on the march. What happened? They say, well, I didn't show up because I don't want to contaminate, your march. Maybe the government say, well, you are a weapon of the imperialism through Manuel Cuesta Morúa. Right. And you don't know that. So I try not to show up at that time. But they call us. And now we're talking about how to make it easier for them to participate with us without contaminating, and at the same time make it easier to us to make them know what is going on and what are our proposals in terms of democracy and human rights. And it is very easy with open communities like LGBTQI and cultural or artistic community that we have a good relation with that.
Okay. I'm going to take the last question, use my authority unless someone has a really burning issue with this. And I want to follow up on what Katrina said. Is there a structural relationship now between the government and the evangelical movement, or does the government just fear the evangelical movement?
They fear it. the government is trapped in the 1992 reform of the Constitution when they allow religious people to assemble freely, and they are trapped right now in this. But they fear them. They collect. It's not this data is not well known, but evangelical movement collected around 180,000 signatures to oppose
Marriage equality.
marriage equality. And this is a figure in terms of Cuban population, you know.
180,000?
100,000, yeah.
180,000.
180,000. It's a lot. And the government, of course, if we can't collect that, get democracy tomorrow. The evangelical movement could.
Well, join me in thanking Manuel. He'll be here so you can talk to him one-on-one, but please join me in thanking him.